Chapter 7. I hope Alex's arm is feeling a little bit better after getting it hit last night, and it was pretty sore. So hopefully it's feeling better now after his baseball competition, right? So, Chapter 7. Sometimes I wonder why I even bother to play baseball at all. I hate the uniforms, I can't throw, and I don't like playing center field. Lately I've been giving this a lot of thought. There's only one thing I can come up with. I play for the Caps. Baseball caps are probably the greatest invention of all time. No matter what you look like, as soon as you put on a baseball cap, you look just like Steve Garvey. Even my cat looks like Steve Garvey with his hat on, with my cap on. Once I did an experiment with my grandmother just to prove it. My grandmother's about 80 years old, but she doesn't look it. She doesn't need a cane and she only wears glasses when she reads. One of the things I like best about my grandma is her blue hair. It's just about the coolest hair I've ever seen. I'm not sure that she really knows it's blue. I think she might be a little bit colorblind. One time at dinner, she told my mother that she puts on a steel gray rinse on it. I started to tell her it looks more like a steel blue, but my mother stuck a roll in my mouth. Anyway, after we finished eating that night, I ran up to my room and grabbed my baseball cap. Then I snuck up behind my grandmother and put it on her head, just like I thought, another Steve Garvey. My grandmother wasn't a very good sport about it. She pulled my cap off her head and dropped it to the floor. Boy, I had really messed up her blue hair. In fact, it was so messy that right at the top of her head, I noticed a little bald spot. I offered to put my cap back on, but she ignored me. I really felt sorry for her. She must have gone to the same barber that I go to. My barber, Mr. Peoples, has given me more bald spots than I can even count. I'll never forget the time he made my head look like a grapefruit. As soon as I walked into a shop that day, I knew I was in trouble. I always think it's a good idea to find out what kind of mood Mr. Peoples is in before I sit down in his chair. Sometimes when barbers aren't feeling very happy, they like to give kids funny haircuts to cheer themselves up. "Hi, Mr. Peoples," I said with a smile. "How are you feeling today?" Mr. Peoples looked at me and frowned. "I'll tell you how I'm feeling," he growled. "I'm hot, tired, and hungry. Any more questions?" No, Mr. Peoples, no more questions," I said as soon as I began backing out of his shop. "Gee, I think I'll hear my mother calling. Maybe I better come back tomorrow." "Knock it off, Alex, and sit down," he ordered, giving me a real disgusted look. Mr. Peoples has known me since I was 2, so he thinks he can talk to me like that. "Are you positive you want me to sit down?" I asked. "I mean, if you're not in a good mood, I'd be happy to leave you alone for a little while." "Sit," he said gruffly, pointing to the chair. Slowly, I climbed into the big red seat. "Well, okay," I agreed, "but I really don't need a big haircut. I'd like you to just take a little bit off the sides, okay?" Mr. Peoples didn't hear a word I said. He was too busy plugging in his electric clippers. "Wait a minute, Mr. Peoples," I said quickly. "Do you really think you need the clippers today? I just want a little trim, remember?" "Who's the barber here, Alex? You or me?" he asked sharply. That's when I decided to be quiet. If there was one thing I didn't want to do, it was make the guy any more upset than he already was. Mr. Peoples started clipping. No, wait, clipping is the wrong word. Mr. Peoples started scalping. You would have made a great Indian, Mr. Peoples, I said, but the clippers were so loud he didn't hear me. He whizzed those loud buzzer clippers all around the back of my head and ended up toward my ears. All of a sudden I heard him say, "Whoopsie!" "Whoopsie," I said nervously. "Did you just say whoopsie, Mr. Peoples?" I looked right in the mirror. Right over my left ear, I saw the whoopsie. It was a big round bald spot. "Well, this may be just a little bit shorter than you wanted it, Alex," said Mr. Peoples, "but at least it's nice and cool for the summer." "Nice and cool," I said angrily. "How do you figure that? If there are any more whoopsies, I'll have to spend the whole summer wearing a big brown bag over my head. Have you ever spent the summer in a paper bag, Mr. Peoples?" "Look on the bright side, Alex," he replied. "Think how easy it'll be to take care of. Instead of combing through a lot of hair, all you have to do is polish your head a little." Then he laughed. I couldn't stand to look in the mirror anymore, so I closed my eyes and waited until he was finished. After circling my head with the clippers about 20 more times, he finally shut them off. Slowly, I opened my eyes and looked into the mirror. I couldn't believe it. I've seen more hair on an egg. I turned my head and looked at it from every angle, hoping to find hair, but it was all gone. "How do you like it?" asked Mr. Peoples, handing me a mirror. "How do I like what?" I growled. "Well, your hair, of course, he answered. I gazed down at the floor. I liked it a lot better when it was on my head, I replied as Mr. Peoples got the broom and started to sweep my hair into a dustpan. He laughed. I guess that means you think it's a little too short, huh? No, Mr. Peoples, I answered. If it was too short, at least some of it would still be growing out of my head. I would say it's too gone. He laughed again. That will be $5, he said, holding out his hand. I slapped the money down and ran home as fast as I could. My mother met me at the door. Look at what the butcher did to me, I yelled, pointing to my head. My mother stared at me for a minute. I could tell she was having a hard time trying not to laugh. Don't worry, she said, finally getting control of herself. The good thing about hair is that it always grows back. Yeah, well, that might be the good thing about hair, I snapped, but what's the good thing about no hair? My mom started to giggle. Then she turned and left the room. Where are you going? I yelled. You've got to help me figure out what to do with all this scalp. I'll be right back, she answered, still snickering. I'm just going to go to the kitchen for a minute. All of a sudden, I have this tremendous craving for grapefruit. Very funny, I screamed at her. Very, very funny. Anyway, right after that, I remembered about my baseball cap. I hurried up to my room to find it. I opened my closet and breathed a sigh of relief. For once, I'd remembered to put it back on the hook where it belonged. I put it on my head and slipped down a little bit. Being bald makes your head a lot thinner. I looked in the mirror. Yep, just like old Steve Garvey. It works every time. I just wish that putting on a baseball cap could make me hit home runs like him. I guess you could say that hitting a home run is sort of like a dream of mine. I don't think it'll ever come true, though. My father says it's pretty hard to hit a home run when all you can do is bunt. I've always thought bunt was a silly word. The first time I heard it, I was only about 7. This kid on my baseball team was on his way up to bat. Before he left the bench, he turned around and said to me, I think I'm going to bunt. At first, I didn't really know what he was talking about, but whatever it was, it didn't sound too good. I tried to figure out what he meant, and I finally decided that bunt was probably another word for puke. Oh no, I thought to myself, that kid's sick and no even knows it. I got off the bench and went running off to the coach and told him that I thought the kid was going to start bunting any minute. That's okay, Alex, said the coach. Don't worry about him. I told him to bunt. Now I was really confused. Why in the world would a coach tell one of his players to throw up? What kind of a trick was this? I hoped he wouldn't tell me to bunt too. Listen, coach, I said, I don't think I could bunt even if I wanted to. I feel pretty good and I haven't even eaten dinner yet. The coach looked at me kind of funny and told me to sit down. I went back to the bench and watched the kid at bat. I wondered when he was going to do it. When the ball came, he took his bat and held it out to the side. I figured he was just trying to get it out of the way so he didn't bunt on it. Since I was next at bat, I thought this was a pretty nice thing to do. But instead of getting sick, the kid took the bat and lightly knocked the ball down the third baseline. He ran as fast as he could and made it to first base in plenty of time. Great bunt, shouted the coach. I turned to the boy sitting next to me. I didn't see him bunt. Where is it? Where is what? He asked. You know, where's the bunt? Weren't you watching? He asked. He just bunted the ball down to third baseline and then ran to first. Suddenly, I knew what a bunt really was. Boy, did I feel like a fool. Thank goodness no one ever knew what I'd been talking about. Anyway, from that day on, I started working on my bunting. After 4 years of practice, I'm probably the best bunter in the entire Little League. I guess it's because no one else bothers working on it very much. Sometimes Brian helps me practice my bunting at recess. Last week, TJ saw me and walked over. Bunting's for sissies, he said, grinning. I ignored him. Anybody with half a muscle can hit the ball hard, he said. I still ignored him. Hey, Skinny Bones. I just thought of something, he said with a smile. Only run, bunt. Get it? It rhymes. That's when I decided to stop ignoring him. Brian pitched me another ball. I held the bat out until the very last minute. Then I turned it so sharply that the ball hit TJ right on the head. Whoops, sorry there, TJ, I said. Seems that all I've been doing lately is accidentally hitting you with baseballs. It's a good thing that one hit you on the head. Otherwise, you might have gotten hurt. TJ walked over, shoved me to the ground, and pounced on top of me. Well, Mr. Skinny Bones, we'll just see about how good you bunt on Saturday, he said. What happens on Saturday, I asked. But TJ didn't understand me. It's hard to speak clearly when your mouth is full of someone's leg. Then I remembered. Saturday was a day when our Little League teams were scheduled to play each other. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, the end of Chapter 7. Can you imagine what this game is going to be like? Love and miss you.